Të nderuar mysafir, faleminderit që jeni ardhur sot këtu me ne. Kam kënaqësinë të prezantoj, të kemi një bisedë të fortë me profesoreshën Jenifer, e cila është shumë direkte në mënyrën se si ajo shprehet në internet. Besoj që do të shprehet njëjtë edhe këtu sot. Ajo njihet si diplomate nga Oxfordi. Unë dua të dëgjoj pak, dua të na tregosh pikëpari për nga erdh kjo nofk, na jep një prezantim, një biografi tënde, sepse më mirë do ta bësh ti se sa që unë mund ta bëj. Faleminderit shumë. Përshëndetje, faleminderit shumë, përshëndetje të gjithëve, falenderoj Institutin OCTOPUS për ftesën, është me të vërtet kënaqësi, është hera e dytë që unë vi këtu në Kosovë, kam qenë në prill, dhe të dy herat kanë qenë me të vërtet përvoja të shkëlqyeshme dhe më vjen shumë mirë për këtë. Atëherë kështu, pak informata lidhur me mua, siç u përmend. Unë jam profesoresh në Universitetin e Oxfordit, ku kam specializuar në teknologji dhe diplomaci dhe kam marrë doktoraturën nga Oxfordi, pasi që kam publikuar, kam shkruar doktoraturën e parë në teknologji dhe diplomaci. Kam shkruar doktoraturën e parë në botë mbi këtë temë, ku në vitin 2018, kam qenë edhe pjesë e organizatës së Kombeve të Bashkuara në zyre në New York, para 5 vitesh, kam punuar për shërbimin diplomatik evropian në Kambodja, kam shërbyer në disa qytete atje dhe gjithashtu edhe në Dublin në Irland, dhe kur kemi pasur presidencën e Këshillit të Evropës në vitin 2013. Pastaj jam kthyer prapë në akademi, pra në fushën e specializimit tim në teknologji, demokraci, politikë evropiane, dhe kam shkruar edhe disa libra lidhur me gjinin dhe diplomacinë. Kjo ishte një përvojë pra në pikat shkurta e imja. Mirë, ndoshta më vonë do të flasim më në detaje për diplomacinë digjitale dhe sa e rëndësishme është ajo dhe çfarë roli ka kryer ajo në këto vitet e fundit. Me që tash kanë kaluar 2 vite nga pushtimi i plot i Rusisë në Ukrainë. Më herët dëgjova kryetarin e kuvendit kur tha se ne kemi pritur pra që kjo që të ndodhë që nga pas pushtimit të Krimes dhe s'kemi bërë shumë. Pra me njerë po filloj me një pyetje të nxehtë për juve. A besoni se Kosova është në rrezik të ndonjë lloj, pra është rrezikuar në çfarëdo mënyre pra nga ndonjë sulm, nga ndonjë pushtim, sikurse ai që ka bërë Rusia në Ukrainë. Dhe me që edhe ne pra jemi fëqinj me një fëqinj i cili nuk mund të definohet si i mirë. Pyetje shumë e nxehtë. Tash, nëse i përgjigjem pjesës së parë të pyetjes, informacioni, kryetari i kuvendit e tha shumë mirë që informacioni ishte aty, e kishim aty para se të ndodhte pushtimi. Pra, njerëzit jo vetëm të nivelit të lartë, po shumë institucione e kishin informacionin. Pra, posaçërisht në fushën kibernetike, në fushën e teknologjisë, është ditur se ka pasur plane për pushtim. Prandaj, po, sa i përket pjesës së parë të pyetjes, dhe tani, sa i përket Kosovës dhe pyetjes se a është e mundshme kjo në Kosovë, sipas mendimit tim personal dhe profesional, me një fëmijë i cili ka aq lidhje të afërta me Rusinë dhe me pushtimin e Ukrainës dhe destabilizimin e tërë regionit, Nuk mendoj se mund të përjashtojmë çfarë do opsione. Nuk do të ishte marrëzi sikur të përjashtoni mundësinë e një pushtimi, qoftë përmes infiltrimit, përmes forcave forcave sekrete apo planeve të aneksimit që keni përjetuar në vitin në vitin 2013 me ato hartat e ndryshme në duart e ushtrisë.
And that's why it is so important for Kosovo and other surrounding countries in the Western Balkans to keep this close alliance with the EU, to keep this close relationship and these close ties, and not to drop your guard. And that's not meant to be, some kind of prophecy or, a scary mantra of any kind, but I just think in this extremely destabilizing time, particularly what we're seeing happening in the Middle East, we're now seeing eyes off Europe, and when eyes are off Europe and when eyes are off Ukraine and Russia, a lot of things can be done, which we've seen happen in the past. Diversions have been used.
Dr. Cassidy, most definitely I believe that Kosovo is not going to let the guard down, but as you were speaking, I cannot hide the fact that there's an asymmetry between what you were saying and between the narrative that is pushed forward right now from the EU in general, let's say, because that's also the main source. It's quite a bizarre new friendship. It's evolving in the Balkans, but not only, as well in Europe. Let's start by the fact that selling arms from a NATO country to a non-NATO country, to a country who hasn't expressed any desire to be part of NATO whatsoever, where does it put actually Kosovo? This country in Europe, that it's one of the most European, most pro-NATO countries. It has expressed all its political will, to go towards that road. And then you have this country that is expressing totally the opposite. Where does it leave Kosovo? What message does it give to the people of Kosovo, to the government of Kosovo?
So, extremely valid question, and actually one that I was discussing last night with a number of colleagues in the room. And I will preface my answer by saying this, that I am very pro-EU. I'm very grateful for the EU as an Irish citizen for standing up for us during the Brexit debacle, let's say. And for once we had an ally. After 800 years, it was very nice to have a few countries in our corner. So, and I've also worked for the EU, so let me preface that. But I also think it is right and just also to let's say, have constructive criticism of institutions, and just because you're supporting them doesn't mean you can't have constructive criticism. And I think that's something that's very much lost due to social media today, the polarization of opinion. You have to be pro the EU, you can't criticize it in any manner, or you have to, and this goes for any institution. But regarding so that's the preface, but regarding my critique in it, I do think, and I've spoken actually at the Council of Europe and also in the Belgian Foreign Ministry just in June, I've spoken on this very subject, so I've said it to them to their face. The issue of the accession of countries, sending mixed messages is, in my opinion, not in good faith for the EU. These countries that have mentioning Kosovo, ticked all the boxes of what is to be done, and the bar seems to be changing all the time. And I don't think as I said, this is the phrase I use, you can't cast a country in a movie that they don't know they're in. You can't keep changing the plot line. You can't keep changing the storyline. So yes, these mixed messages of not allowing one country in or keeping it moving forward, and then also sending another message to another country who is, anti-NATO. This doesn't work well, and I know their intention behind it is to keep everyone's eyes on the EU, on the West and not the East. But I do think playing this really long game can lead to isolation and could, in the long term, backfire to the EU. And that's something they need to work on, and hopefully they will start working on it. But as I said, you can be pro institutions, and also that's the only reason institutions will be able to grow and benefit if they have constructive criticism. So.
It would have been good if it was actually only an issue of narratives and of diverse narratives, but unfortunately the EU has also a series of measures that it has taken against Kosovo, because there's no other way how to describe it actually. Do you believe that they should be lifted? And I believe that, of course, the answer is yes. Like a sane mind would say yes. But what do you think is the best way to go forward from now on with Kosovo from the EU perspective? If you would like play a bit, that's it.
Well, I fully agree that these measures should be lifted, and this is something I also said at the Women, Peace and Security Conference here in April. I think there needs to be full membership for Kosovo. From my reading of all the documents, all the details, I really thought last May that for the Council of Europe that this was going to work. However, the key major challenges, unfortunately, are a number of countries, Spain, Greece, in particular, Hungary. These are the main challengers to full extension into the EU, and how to go about this. If I had a a perfect strategy, I would have set it to the EU by now. But it is, in my opinion, in some way trying to, not Kosovo trying to influence them, but other states within the EU getting these countries on board. For example, Ireland has a very, very close relationship with Spain due to its foreign policy initiatives on a number of areas. So Ireland, for example, could make stronger relations with Spain and influence Spain on this, while other countries who have stronger influence with Greece in the EU could seek to influence that. I don't think perhaps Kosovo will be able to directly influence those 5 nations within the EU, but what could be done is inside the EU, there could be more bilateral agreements and more bilateral meeting and pressure. I don't think we should be afraid of the word pressure, saying and speaking up, being like this, all these commitments have been made, all these changes have been done, and also making sure that these 5 countries who are not recognizing Kosovo for their reasons of feeling threatened, that those threats will not be an issue. So making sure that.
Do you believe that the flirting, let's say, that the EU is doing towards, because it's also it makes sense. Like, I mean, I wouldn't like to play the devil's advocate in this case, but even myself, if I would be in their position, I would try to lure them towards the EU and not the opposite. But do you think that the patience will end at some point, and then you will see a change, like a diplomatic change in the language, in the digital diplomacy, and we know how important that is. And I don't know if you followed lately some of the tweets towards Kosovo that were coming from Serbia. It's the same narrative, and it's a very similar narrative. This Serbian world, it's very similar to the Ruski Mir world, which is Mir is the world, exactly. And I would like to have your opinion on it. Like, do you believe that hypothetically, worst case scenario, what would it mean if Russia would win this war for Kosovo? What would that mean for Kosovo?
So to answer that question directly, for Kosovo, it would be, without entry into the EU, it would be extremely destabilizing. You would have a Russian victory, the full annexation of Ukraine. You have Belarus, which is if I can be so, I'm not a diplomat anymore, so I can speak in undiplomatic terms. This is one of the reasons I left. A proxy state, if it's even, I could go so far as to not even call it a proxy state. It's, you know, if you allow your country to be used as a vehicle for a land incursion into the Ukraine, I think you're more than just a proxy state. Serbia is certainly a proxy state for Russia, and so with a victory like that, not only would you have more destabilization in the region, but you have an emboldened Russia. And looking forward then, if we're kind of predicting into the future, you could possibly have a Trump presidency. I maybe won't open that can of worms in the room, just I don't know where people's loyalties lie. So, but however, we know that he is very close with Putin. And so you will not only have a destabilizing region in the Western Balkans, but also the entire geopolitical landscape. If you have a change presidency in the US, an emboldened Putin, this could, you know, have disastrous consequences. We see the ease at which Russia annexes throughout history. It's not a a once in a lifetime thing for Russia. It's quite a predictable trend of what they do.
Indeed, I have only a couple of questions, and then I would like to address the audience if they would like to have some questions. So there's this, actually, let's put it like this. We have to be straightforward. I mean, you are not a diplomat, I'm a journalist, I'm allowed to, why not? We're in Ukraine, if we would be speaking a year ago, maybe we would be speaking differently. Right now it has some stiff competition with what is happening in the Middle East right now. And do you believe, because very often it's fitted this narrative that the US cannot concentrate in more than one objective, and how true is that? Like, does it influence or whatsoever its, let's say, demands and importance that it puts to Ukraine, the fact that now there are also some other wars going on that are taking some of the attention from the US and NATO as well?
Yeah, I'm not a diplomat, but that is still a scary question to answer in a room full of policymakers and diplomats. But I'm Irish, so I'll give my opinion. So, yes.
Maybe we can discuss, like, is that a real anxiety that we should be concerned?
Yeah, so without going into, I think everyone knows Irish, not everyone knows, but Irish politics and where we stand on a number of issues. So I don't have to go into that. But yeah, of course, look, regarding the US, their new deal with Ukraine, the agreed 50 billion a year, along with training centers and posts. So that was this was done a year and a half ago. But regarding what is happening in the Middle East, and I'm sure everyone has seen what happened last night, this is now one of the US's greatest, other than Putin, Iran is one of their greatest, yeah. So they're going to be spread thin, but I do think, not to keep going back to the election we're going to have in November, that is going to really change the geopolitical landscape. NATO's already trying to, in the last meeting with Jens Stoltenberg, they've already tried to Trump-proof NATO, they call it, if he is elected, and so that will, in a few months, it'll be quite a different story, particularly because of the isolationism of his foreign policy. But that was quite a diplomatic answer, I think.
It will do. Yeah. Last question. Now this regards much more exactly your field of digital diplomacy. We are faced with thousands of bots or hundreds of thousands of Serbian bots, Russian bots. They are trying to attack information on all platforms. What are your main concerns and some advices for us who spend a lot of time online?
Well, tying into the theme and the title of today, and having dug a lot deeper for when coming here for this speech, to the extent that Serbia is such a close ally with Russia, I had known, but not known to the extent. Being very honest, I'd known this, but not to the extent. And I was having a discussion yesterday, even seeing that their now deputy, if I'm right, their now deputy prime minister is also on a U.S. sanctioned for being a corrupt official, not during his time as deputy prime minister, but during his time as information. This is why I'm bringing it up as well, the information strategy and warfare. Also, the frequent visits to Moscow. We know that they're the only country that has not closed its airspace to Russia and not had given sanctions. So for Kosovo to have a neighboring, alongside its history with Serbia, to have a neighboring country that's so closely allied with Russia is, well, not only a challenge, that's to put it dilutely, but to tie into the digital diplomacy. Russia from the very beginning, so Russia and Ukraine during my PhD were actually my core PhD case studies, along with Israel and Gaza, but this was in 2014. So I didn't know that these case studies were going to then become flashpoints again. But the Russians from 2013 I've been analyzing their disinformation tactics, and they're some of the top tactics in the world, and their ability to do so. And also to infiltrate through covert groups. We've seen the Wagner group in Serbia, also stirring up this nationalism through social media, through bots, and where, even though we all know about bots, there is a psychological warfare component that you may know it's a bot, but still constantly reading it, constantly reading this message. Some of you, not some of you, some part of you, it seeps in, and this is, I'll finish on this, but to say that regarding disinformation and bots and misinformation, we must remember that in diplomacy, this is nothing new. This has always been around. Through every war, we've always seen misinformation, disinformation. This is just another tool in the diplomats or the leaders' toolbox. And just before I finish, I'll just give one analogy that I always say, because people think that social media has revolutionized diplomacy. I also say it's an evolution, not a revolution. The core components of diplomacy are still there. And the anecdote that I give is that, so when Lord Palmerston in 1851, he was the British Foreign Secretary at the time, when he received his first telegram, he replied, his exact words were, "By God, this is the end of diplomacy." And he said it because he had to reply within 4 weeks. He said in his diary, "How am I going to attend my dinners as ambassador? How am I going to have my meetings when I need to write 5 lines within a month?" And he said, "Diplomacy is dead." And I'm like, if he was around today and he thought that he had to tweet or reply within 2 minutes, or if you get an email and you don't reply within 5 minutes, what's wrong? So, every wave of communication, be it the telegraph, be it the fax, be it 24-hour news, be it digital diplomacy, and now artificial intelligence, it's just an evolution of what's happened. The core pillars of diplomacy, communication, representation, and negotiation, are still fundamental pillars. It's just a different way of engaging with them. And we have to learn how to engage with them in order to be able to overcome them.
Thank you very much. I would like to address the audience if anyone has a question to Dr. Cassidy. Yeah.
I write to be prestigious, but I want to tell that my name is Dragan Shormaz. I'm from Serbia. I was for 22 years a member of parliament in Serbia. Now I'm a president of one NGO, Euro-Atlantic Council of Serbia. I'm in love with Dublin. I think that Guinness is a nectar of God.
Thank you.
And I think that Phil Lynott is the biggest rocker of all time, and I have his tattoo on my right, of my right shoulder. So I love Ireland and Irish people. I must tell about everything what you said, that I believe that Russia is the enemy of everyone in the region. Serbia leads a schizophrenic foreign policy. And I'm somebody who is against that foreign policy. I'm for membership of Serbia in EU and NATO. But it is not the ally of Russia. I think that you use that term. Serbia is an EU candidate. And Serbia was visited by Scholz and Macron in the last month. In the last month, Chancellor Scholz and President Macron. Do you think that both in Kosovo and Serbia should focus more on dialogue rather than thinking about games of thrones and big games of big countries and superpowers?
Yep. Thank you so much for your question and for your love of Dublin. Very much appreciated. No, it's an extremely valid question, and when delving deep into this topic, one thing that kept coming up every time I began to look at another aspect of this, and actually you leading in about Ireland is a perfect lead into this, is the similarities actually between what happened in Ireland and our peace process and how that came about, and how that can be used perhaps as a template for focusing on relations and mutual understanding between Kosovo and Serbia. So in 1998, we had the Good Friday Agreement in Ireland, which was negotiated by Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, and Bertie Ahern, the Irish Taoiseach, our Prime Minister. And we never thought, we had 800 years of British imperialism. We had the bloody war with the British, then we had a civil war, and then we had what we call in Ireland the Troubles, even though it was a war. Only in Ireland would we just call it Troubles, but it was a war. And my parents lived on the border, the Irish border, and they had to have their couches up against the windows to make sure the bombs didn't shatter all the windows. So my parents lived through all of this. And then the border came up, they removed the border in 1998. Now Brexit tried to put it back in, but we won't open that can of worms today. But regarding that understanding, no one thought that that would ever be possible, that a Good Friday Agreement, that a border removal, that the North and South could ever live in peace. It was never a belief. But with third-party mediation and with people really committed to making sure this happened. So one of the things was the demilitarization of the IRA, the terrorist group, before any negotiations were to take place. And then also was a focusing on understanding of mutual respect between both cultures. So in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, for example, you can choose to have an Irish passport, a British passport, or both. So you don't have to choose. But regarding, now that took, it was an 800-year occupation, so it took 100 years to get to this point. But perhaps looking a bit more short term, if I could say, for policy recommendations on Kosovo and Serbia, perhaps, and I say this as an outsider, so I don't in any way mean to say this as dogma for the people who live there and experience this on day-to-day basis, but perhaps focusing on the things that can be achieved at this moment, that regarding, for example, youth communication between Serbia and Kosovo, or even in northern Kosovo with Serbs and the youth in Kosovo, more communicate, that very much helped in Ireland, preserving cultural heritage, all infrastructure, all these things that are not too politically charged, but can allow for some agreement and mutual understanding, and then building the steps to ultimately, of course, Serbia recognizing Kosovo. But to end the question, I think you can chase two dreams at once, right? You don't. I think you can seek to have this extension, Serbia and Kosovo in the EU, but you can also be working on this mutual understanding, because they both go hand in hand. If this mutual understanding and respect and the peace and reconciliation can begin, I think that's also another easier way into the EU. I hope that answers your questions.
If I may add only one thing, as I was listening to you, I most definitely believe that one case to another cannot compare, and of course what went through with all the Irish wars are a story, and what's going on with Kosovo and what went with Kosovo, it's another story. Unfortunately, the Minister of Culture accused just a couple of months ago rightly Serbia for cultural genocide, because there is like a huge number of events that happened during the war, after the war, pre-war, that led to this conclusion. So I believe that this narrative of stabilization, of any type of relationship between youth and this and that, it was tried and it will be tried. Logically, it's the only way that it has to go forward. But I think that before that, we need a series of measures to be taken and to be negotiated with the EU. Okay, we will accept that, I believe. But in order to, we need some, I think as Kosovo, maybe it needs some justice.
So the piece, sorry if I...
So this is what I want.
Just to, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but I know I said it in passing, but I want to reiterate there that the Good Friday Agreement, this came after like 150 years. So I'm recognizing fully that in Kosovo, it's 25 years since liberation, not even 20 years since 2008. This is, in Ireland, that wouldn't have even been on the picture, 1998 or Good Friday Agreement if it was in that time scale. So I'm in no way comparing that and the time, the time span of that. But it's something that we never thought would ever be possible. But regarding the time. So I'm in no way comparing that, because Ireland would not have done that.
We are hopeful indeed. Do we have another question from the audience that we can take? We have left a couple of minutes. Yes, sir.
Përshëndetje për gjithë mësaferat këtu dhe për audiencën. Unë kam dy pyetje të shkurtra.
Hang on. Thank you. Sorry, I should speak Albanian, but I don't.
Emri më është Tavni Islami, vin nga fusha e sigurisë, profesor i shkencave të sigurisë. Unë kam dy pyetje të shkurtra dhe po përpiqem që të jem sa më shkurt në mënyrë që të mos marr kohën të tjerëve. Pyetja e parë është lidhur me Ukrainën dhe do doja të marr një mendim nga juaj se sa është përgjegjëse ose sa janë përgjegjëse vendet se që është Shtetet Bashkuara të Amerikës, Britania e Madhe, lidhur me sulmin në Ukrainë, sepse dihet mirëfillet që në vitin 1994, pas një përpjekje të madhe, u bë demontimi ose kokat bërthamore të cilat I kishte Ukraina u dorëzuan në Rusi. E dihet mirëfilli që Ukraina ishte vendi I tretë për ka numrin dhe sasinë ose fuqinë bërthamore. Prandaj kjo lufta e fundit, pyetja është kjo: a duhet të jenë përgjegjës se këto vende të cilat I bën presion që të dorëzojnë kokat bërthamore në Rusi dhe balanca ushtarake në momentin kur nuk ka forcë bërthamore Ukraina, është dobësuar dhe pikërisht këtë e shfrytëzoi Rusia. Dhe do doja pyetjen e dytë të shkurtër lidhur me Kosovën. Pra, para ngjarjes së 24 shtatorit të vitit të kaluar, kur ndodhi rasti në Banjska, Bashkia Ndërkombëtare vendosi sankcione ndaj Kosovës për shkak të veriut të vendit, ku kërkoi që njësitë speciale të policisë të Kosovës të tërhiqen nga veriu. Dhe pikërisht institucionet e Republikës së Kosovës, duke analizuar situatën në 4 komunat veriore, forcat speciale të saj I vendosin në pika të caktuara, duke ditur dhe duke njohur situatën. Prandaj, pyetja është se a kishte të drejtë Bashkia Ndërkombëtare vendosin e sanksione ndaj Republikës së Kosovës. Ju falenderoj.
Thank you so much for those questions. So for the first question regarding, well, do the US and the UK bear any responsibility for this regarding the removal of the nuclear power? My personal and professional answer is no. I think the US and the UK bear a lot of responsibility for a lot of things worldwide, but not this one. Everything is true what you said regarding the removal of the nuclear plant and the weakening, therefore, of Ukraine's hard power, and also the ability to defend itself by, simply diplomatic signals, having, nuclear power. However, as mentioned previously, this is in Russia's game, playbook. This is these invasions, these annexations. These are nothing new to Russia. Whether people have power plants or countries have power plants or not, whether there's an army waiting for them or not, this is a cycle of particularly Putin's playbook. The politics of geography are extremely important to him. And we've known this throughout his reign. So I think no matter nuclear power plant or not, nuclear power or whether they had this or not, there would have been another reason to go in. There would have been another narrative to go in. So we know that this really started on the 21st of November 2013, when Ukraine were meant to sign the extension treaty for the EU. And then we had, 8 months of fighting, and then the excuse for the end, then we had the annexation of Crimea, and then 8 years of that before the land incursion. So, this is classic textbook Putin, and although we could look at it through the lens of hard power, having that security of nuclear power. Could it have been a buffer? Perhaps, but I don't think it would have been a long-term buffer. He had his eyes set on Ukraine. He had his eyes set particularly on the east. And as we know, as I said, the politics of geography are so important to him. And he, after 2004, with the extension of so many EU countries from the east, eastern countries European Eastern countries coming into the European Union, and now he had possibly another EU country now going to be at his doorstep, he would have found another way in. And the evidence, as we noted at the very start of this, all pointed to that. So I don't think in this case the US and the UK bear responsibility. They could have been a buffer, as I said, for a few more months, but not more. And on the second question regarding the sanctions in the north, for Kosovo simply putting its institutions there for security reasons. Personally, and again, I bring the comparison back to Ireland. I think there's in nearly every question I had prepared, I have a comparison with Ireland underneath. It's very similar. No, I personally don't think there should have been sanctions. If they wanted to do something regarding the extension, a warning perhaps, but also Kosovo, if we are going down the line of, which we should go down the line of protecting territorial integrity, which is exactly what today is about, talking about Ukraine, respecting sovereignty, respecting a country and their statehood and their right to, create the institutions as they wish, in line with the rule of law. This is something that I believe Kosovo should be allowed to do, have their defense, and so I think for me it was a bit too much of a hand playing into Kosovo, and it should have been left.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cassidy. I wish we had more Cassidys in the diplomacy, but in academia it will do as well. Thank you all for being with us. Before we all head out, I would like to remember we have a small coffee break and then we're coming back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.